God's really blessed with my life and everything. There was a time some years ago before I really got deeper into the Adventist church, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But I was a deep sea explorer. I got to go down in the submarines, Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, Sea Link 1 and Sea Link 2. Some of you guys may have seen IMAX, the Galapagos. They filmed that using the Sea Link 1 and 2. And by the time I was 24 years old, everything I wanted to do in life according to science, every science goal that I ever had or dreamed of having, I either did or had the opportunity to do. And so discovered a new species, a deep ocean organism, worked with the Smithsonian Institute as a visiting scientist with Dr. Frederick Baer and Dr. Stephen Cairns. And so it was really, really cool how those doors opened up. I always wanted to do something with space. And so during the same time period, my wife, Zinnia, we didn't even know each other at the time, she was working on the space shuttle engines and launch code, and she got Employee of the Month a lot of times and everything. So that was really cool, with that part. So I got to do deep ocean, and she got to do space. When I was in the second grade, just to tell you about myself and where I was coming from, second grade, I'm in school, I'm in classes. It's like the third day of class, and this girl shows up. I didn't know what love was, but I would say love at first sight. I really liked her, and I thought if she really liked me too, she would sit beside me. And she did. She sat right beside me, and that was super cool. And so what made it really special is she had a Miss America lunchbox, and I had a Scooby-Doo lunchbox. Doesn't get much better than that. So anyway, I was like, oh, this is great. She likes me. As the year went on, I guess it was about this time. It's sort of January. It's kind of a rainy day, but it was back when we used to have something called winter. It was colder, than 60 degrees outside. And we were out on the playground. And so anyway, I just leaned into her, and we're on the playground, and she was my first kiss. I kissed her on her cheek. And I felt bad for her friend who was standing there, and so I kissed her too. And yeah, life lesson. No, I was in little Snoopy's doghouse on that one. So yeah, bummer. So anyway, we considered ourselves an item. We never really said, we were. It was just understood. And I don't know what dating was like in the second and third and fourth grade. Maybe we just ate crayons together. I don't know. But we were, considered an item. And so each school year, like the beginning of third grade, I was like, oh, is she going to sit beside me? And are we still an item? And sure enough, there she'd be. She'd sit right beside me. The fourth grade, she'd sit beside me. Fifth grade, I was told by the teacher, it's like, okay, students, remember as always, we're sitting you guys alphabetically. And I was like, what? And so turns out from the second, third, fourth grade, we were all seated alphabetically. I'm a Beasley, she's a Crocker. And I was like, my world was rocked. I was like, what? I thought she wanted to be, and then it was all these question marks. Does she really want, So anyway, so it was going okay. Well, she was missing more and more classes by the time we were in the fifth grade. And so she was missing classes, and I was like, I didn't really pay much attention. She missed some in the fourth grade, missed more in the fifth grade. And then our principal, she announced, it was on a day like this, a January day, the principal, she announced on the intercom, she went into detail. She said, students, just a few moments ago, Mary Crocker died of a brain tumor. She'd been fighting cancer for years, and the brain tumor was the size of a lemon, and she went into all this detail, and I was absolutely crushed for a number of reasons. I would find out years later my parents knew she was dying, and they never told me a word about it. The other thing is that I felt we'd live forever. You see, I was raised in a weird thing. I was raised an atheist, but I wasn't told there was no God. We just never mentioned God. And so it just hit me like a ton of bricks that she's gone. And that's how I first learned about such a thing as death in the fifth grade. And so later, a couple of months later, the seniors were showing a black and white movie. It was a reel-to-reel movie. You paid 50 cents. It was a fundraiser for them. And so anyway, I went in. I love ships. I love the ocean. And so watched this thing, and I was really enjoying it, except there was one part where in this particular movie, there was a wave that hit the ocean, hit the beach, and when it pulled back, there was a skeleton, and it absolutely floored me. It was like, We're all going to die. What's the point of living? I'm in the 5th grade going into 6th by now, and I'm like, what's the point of living? If I get close to you, I may die and hurt you. You may die and hurt me. You get it? So without God or anything like that, there is no purpose to life. And I wasn't told that as a kid. We were just raised in an empty home. And so I went into a depression for years. I would cry myself to sleep, wear a mask during the day, but it was like, what's the point of life? There is no point to life. We're just here to exist and die. To me, if you're an atheist, it has got to be, if you're truly an atheist, you've got to be the most miserable person on this planet. What's the point? Had Uncle Monroe. Some of you guys may have heard of Monroe Krausen, maybe not, but back in the 1970s, I think he was doing the sign program, the billboards, Seventh-day Adventist Church welcomes you and stuff. I didn't know that, but my great Uncle Monroe, he called our house, and the phone went ring, ring, and so back in the day, a long time ago, there would be this little box on the side of a wall, and you would pick up this thing, and it had a cord, and you would speak into it like, hello, but you wouldn't say, hello, Uncle Monroe. You didn't know who was calling. It didn't have caller ID. You would just go, hello, and then you would hear a voice on the other end, and then you would answer, and so anyway, it was like, hello, and he'd go, hello, Stan, this is your great Uncle Monroe. And I was like, hey, Uncle Monroe, and he said, hey, I was wondering, you and your brothers want to go to church this weekend? And I looked at my brothers. I put them on hold. And I was like, I put my brothers on hold, and I was like, Uncle Monroe on hold, and I was like, hey, Uncle Monroe, he wants us to go to this thing called a church. You guys want to go? And they go, we'd never heard of a church. And we're like, sure, we'll go. And so anyway, I said, Uncle Monroe, we'll go. And he goes, I'll pick you up Saturday morning. And then we were like horrified. I said, okay, that's great, because on Saturday morning, we watched cartoons, that was our thing. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Like if you were raised in another church or something like that, Saturday mornings in the 1970s, that was Looney Tunes time. That was Bugs Bunny and everything. And so we go to this thing. This is the church. This is where we went. The Clanton Seventh-day Adventist Church, Clanton, Alabama. And that's the way it looked then, and that's the way it looks now. Yep. That's it. So went over and took a picture. So we go in, and I made my first craft. We went to this crazy thing called, now look, for you guys, it's normal. I get it, but not for me, not atheist kid. That thing was called Sabbath school. It sounded like it had a gazillion B's in it. Sabbath school. And so I made my first craft. We went down into the basement, and I'm public school. I've got virtual tattoos. I don't, but, I felt like I did, and it was like, I'm public school. And this is the 8th, 9th grade by this time. I have no clue when, but 8th or 9th grade. And I was a rough high school guy. Public school kind of a guy. And so we go, and we made a craft. And it was a bee. And what was really cool about this bee, because you had the kids who made crafts before, and they would spin it, and it would make a bzzz noise, but I was too cool to spin mine. So they rang this bell, and the kids left. Off they go. Well, I hung back. They turned out the lights. Today people would be horrified. It's like, you left a kid in the basement, whatever, lights are out. There was just enough light coming from a window in this basement. And so when nobody was looking, I got behind a pillar, and I took that bee, and I spun it. It made that noise, and I was like, I smiled. I was like, I made a bee, And then the floor creaked, and I was like, oh no, someone's going to see me. I'm too cool to play with a craft, And so, and the other thing on craft, I learned in history, that was the other thing that threw me, was that when you mention craft, it had a bad connotation where I went, because that meant witchcraft. So whenever they're talking about like a craft, anyway, I was like, what? So anyway, we're going to do a craft? 400 years ago, you'd be burned at the stake for that. So anyway, made the craft. And so then I heard the floor creak, and up the stairs I go. And I went and I saw this thing. It was called a pew. So, hey, you take them for granted. I thought, cool, It's like a 1970 Cadillac front seat, So it was like, it's huge. And so anyway, we sat down, and there was a little old lady. Now, it could have been my great Aunt Maxine, Uncle Monroe's wife. It could have been. And so they had a Bible. And so I'd never seen a Bible before. And so it was this special book. And so the pastor, you guys, you're making such a difference, guys and girls. Awesome. So the pastor came in, and I didn't know what a pastor was. This person was in a suit, looking pretty spiffy. And so he said, turn in your Bibles, that book. And the lady, she reached and she turned wherever he said, wherever it was. And so I was watching him. She had the Bible open and she was pointing here, and he quoted from memory. And I was sold. That was awesome. You knew this book backwards and forwards. And I was like, from memory. So I commend you guys. From memory. That was impressive. And you had me. And so, anyway, because my life had been science. And so, anyway, it was like, but he spoke with such peace. And we didn't have peace. My parents fought all the time. My dad cheated on my wife. My dad cheated on my mom. So yeah, thank you. So anyway, I would say it's bizarre with this day and age, who knows, right? So anyway, we went through Uncle Monroe says, do you want to come back next Sabbath? And I was like, yes. And so anyway, we came back. And my brothers, we've gone for like 3 Sabbaths in a row, and we're like, peace. We found an oasis. And so they were doing this thing called a Revelation seminar. Remember those? And so when you guys do your evangelism, you do make a difference. You do. So be of good courage. You're making a difference in the world, one soul at a time. And so anyway, they did the thing, and my dad was coming, my grandparents were coming, my mom was coming. And so anyway, my dad started having more and more questions when talking about smoking, drinking, and running around, okay? And so then things got a little iffy at home. But anyway, they had this thing called an altar call. Well, you know what that is. And so anyway, they're saying, hey, if you want Jesus in your life, and I felt such peace. And so come forward. And so I about knocked everybody down trying to get to the front. And so we got to the front, and there were 17 of us. And they talked about this thing called a baptism. And that, it's a public display, like if you accept Jesus in your life, boom. And I was like, okay, cool, sign us up. And my dad didn't come down. And I talked to my mom later, and I was like, do you think we ought to wait for Dad? And she said, oh, no. She goes, no, we need to go ahead and get baptized. And she says, I'm getting rebaptized. And I was like, rebaptized? She goes, yeah. And when you're baptized, you'll be 4th generation Seventh-day Adventist. And I'm like, whoa. Now, I found out, we've been here 11 years. A couple of years ago, side note, alumni weekend over at a place called Collegedale Academy. Hey, look, we're all in it together, right? So GCA, AAA, we're all friends. And so anyway, it just so happened I was working at Collegedale Academy. And so I was on the phone with my mom, and I said, hey, I got to go. It's alumni weekend, and I've got some duties. And she goes, oh, what are the honors years? And I was like, I said, I don't really know exactly, but I think it's da-da-da. And she goes, oh, that's my honor year. And I said, you went to Collegedale Academy? She goes, yeah, I graduated from there. I didn't know my parents. You know what I'm saying? And this was just a couple of years ago. So anyway, the baptism. I'd never seen a baptism, much less been in one. They told us that you would get wet. Okay, I knew that much. And so it came to that night, and so I went up the stairs. I saw these people. They go up the stairs dry, and they'd come down the stairs wet. They go up the stairs dry, come down the stairs wet. No kidding. I'd never seen one, and I'm in my penguin outfit. And so I walk up the stairs, and the pastor said, and it was a nighttime baptism thing. They turned out all the lights in the church. It was standing room only, kind of like you guys. There are chairs if you want to sit down. But anyway, they have the foyer open, and so people were in the foyer standing. They had folding chairs. Remember, it's not that big of a church. Packed, and they had candles. It was beautiful. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. And so the pastor said, now look, I did see my dad. He did show up. He was sitting in the back, and he was glaring at me the whole time. But you know what? I'm there for God. I'm there for Christ. I'm not there for you. And so anyway, so the pastor says, in the name, this is truly the way it happened, okay? Not as loud. The pastor goes, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Boom, down I go, and everything. And so when he raised me up, it was the biggest rush I'd ever had in my life. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever felt in my life. And so I screamed. I did. I never said that. But I screamed, let's do that again! knowing now what I didn't know then, I'm surprised they didn't go, no more bubbles, no more bubbles. Let's bring him up, But it was amazing. It was such a rush. And so, anyway, we get home, and my parents exploded. My dad exploded all over my mom. And that night, my dad, he forbid us. If I can go on to the next one, blink. He forbid us never to go to church again. You're done. No more Bibles, all Bibles out of this home. Nothing. No more prayer, nothing. Gone. But you know what? You can forbid me to go to church. You can take away my Bible that I didn't really know all that well. But you can take all that away. But you can't take the peace of Jesus from my heart. Okay? And in looking back, I thought we had a normal childhood. We did. And police were there all the time. It was crazy. So be with those who you just baptize and you never see them again. You never know. You never know. Jesus knows everything. You never know. A few years go by. I'm still forbidden to go to church. Now I'm attending the University of Montevallo, halfway between Birmingham and Montgomery, Alabama. The heart of Dixie is what they used to call it, because it was in the middle of the South. They got a little star thing there. But anyway, the University of Montevallo, I didn't know how to pray. My prayers were like, God help me. That's about it. But I think that pretty much summed it up. I think God says, I gotcha, So at the University of Montevallo, I was so afraid that I would become an atheist or agnostic, because I'm majoring in biology, and I figured, God, I want to know you. Do you really exist? And so I was hit with evolution, and where God has his thing, Satan's got a counterfeit. And here we've got, where it says evolution, and this one says man is but a worm. Isn't that what Satan wants to bring us down to that level? My mentor in college was Dr. E.B. Sledge. And Sledge, he was like the father in a sense that I never, ever had. But he was also my evolution teacher. I had him for field natural history, comparative anatomy, which was an evolution-based course. But you may have heard of Sledge. Some of you may have heard of Sledge. Have you heard of the Band of Brothers? Some of you guys heard of the miniseries Band of Brothers. Have you heard of The Pacific? It was the other version. Sledge wrote a book called With the Old Breed in Paleodu at Okinawa, and with the old breed at Paleodu in Okinawa. He was a Marine. And so Sledge, he wrote this book, and suddenly, it's from an infantryman's point of view. And so he would go on tour or go to CNN, to Fox News, whatever, and I would house sit for him, take care of his home. And so that ultimately became a miniseries. He wanted nothing to do with Hollywood, but it became a miniseries on HBO. And I watched it. I don't like the language and all that stuff, but it brought back so many memories. It made it so real for Sledge. So I'm taking evolution, and I said to God, help me. I've got to take this course. It's evolution, and I just want to know you. When I'm done with this thing, I don't want to be done with you. And so God constantly was throwing out stuff. Hey, Stan, what about this? Hey, Stan, what about this? And so, anyway, now I give talks about this, what God showed me through science without the Bible, about evidence for God through science. Anyway, there were two questions that I asked Sledge, that I was impressed to ask Sledge. One question then, and one question a couple of weeks later, because I didn't want to embarrass Sledge. And I was like, Sledge, how did life on this world begin? And he goes, oh, cool. And he goes, consider our universe. See all these stars and these galaxies? He said, consider a wheelbarrow full of sand. You come into here with a wheelbarrow full of sand, heap full of sand. Each sand grain represents one galaxy in our universe. He goes, Stan, there are billions and billions and billions of galaxies. And he said, now consider if you had a second wheelbarrow full of sand. You bring it in here, and you've got it heaping full. And he says, think about it. One of those sand grains now represents a star in one of those galaxies. There are billions and billions and billions of stars in one galaxy. And he says, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of stars. And he says, but you know what? At one time, consider this, all the matter in the universe fit on the head of a pin. Now, according to the science books that I have now, they say, get this, that takes a lot of faith. It used to be a basketball, a football, head of a pin when I knew Sledge. Now then they say it's billions of times smaller than the tip of a needle. That takes faith. And he said something happened. Now you guys would say, the Big Bang, God spoke it and boom. Yeah. He said something happened and boom, you had the Big Bang 13 billion years ago. Well, to me, it's so dense, you wouldn't have any movement of anything. You could never have a Big Bang. But anyway, everything exploded out. And then over billions of years, you had about 4.25 billion years ago, you had the early Earth. Now get this, they can't explain the moon with moon theory. They said that about 500,000 years, whatever, into Earth's existence, the Earth was hit by a Mars-sized planetoid, and it blew out the backside of our planet, and that over billions of years coalesced to become our nice round moon. I've got a problem with that, but I don't think I can share it with you during our meetings here. But hey, if I'm ever invited again, or if y'all get something to do at midnight, let me know. I'll come and do a presentation on that one, okay, whatever. And he says, you had this primordial sea, early oceans filled with all these chemicals, and they're bumping into each other. And then he said that over billions of years, you had that one cell. This is critical. You had your first cell. You had that first cell. And then he said, over time, that cell divided. And then you got multicellular organisms, plants and animals, ancient marine life, things that are now extinct. You had the evolution, he said, of the land animals. To me, that's crazy because that's toxic. Here, the age of the dinosaurs. And he says, all the biodiversity, that's every living thing on this planet, came from that first cell. I was like, thank you, Dr. Sledge. And we went on with the lesson. 2 weeks later, I asked this question, Dr. Sledge, if you were to take a male deer and a female deer and put them on an island somewhere, no other deer present, what would happen? And he goes, this is what would happen. They would mate with each other and you would have offspring. And then those offspring would reach reproductive maturity and they would interbreed. And then he said that you would get mutation and then extinction within 300 to 400 years. And I said, thank you. You can't have it both ways. You can't. You get it? You can't have it both ways. Did you get that point? Because you can't go from one cell and get every living thing on this planet and at the same time take two complex organisms and go to extinction in 300 to 400 years. It's that kind of stuff that God helped me throughout my collegiate careers. When I was about a senior in college, my dad said, you can go back if you want to. So then I started coming back to church. And this is where I want to encourage you, be warm to those people who are wearing shabby clothes. I didn't have any Sabbath clothes. I would sit on the second row. I had a lot of catching up to do. I like to sit near the front because there are fewer talkers there. And so, you know what I'm talking about. That's where I like to be. Now, I'll compromise with my wife. When you see me at church, I'm kind of in the middle. She likes to sit in the back. I don't. I like to sit up as close as I can because I just want to be you, Jesus, and me. Okay? Yet for us, there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. Okay, thank you for your time.